This scam has become legitimized by law, and we're told it's a wonderful thing.
The strange part is not that it exists. The strange part is that no one sees it. It sits in plain sight, explained, documented, official, and still invisible.
And it's a fact that most Americans have not even considered, that there might have been some kind of deception, massive deception, because the scam would have been exposed from the beginning.
What you're about to hear explains with unsettling accuracy what we see happening in the world today. We all felt it, but no one ever placed it this clearly in front of us. Once you understand it, the dots begin to connect. And that's the moment you realize you can take back control of your life.
Appearances are of four kinds. Things either are as they appear to be, or they neither are nor appear to be, or they are but do not appear to be, or they are not and yet appear to be.
This is G. Edward Griffin. He spent years studying documents and testimony that most people never look at, not to create a story, but to understand the structure behind it. He goes further than most are willing to go, and what he uncovered changes how you see what is in front of you every day. So pay close attention to what he says throughout this video. A veil will be lifted from your eyes, and if you truly understand what he is describing, you may never struggle with money again. Take your time with this one, because once you see the mechanism clearly, you know exactly what you have to do. Let's begin.
It all began in November of 1910, when Senator Nelson Aldrich sent his private railroad car to the New Jersey Railroad Station, where there it was in readiness for the arrival of himself and 6 other men who were instructed to come under conditions of great secrecy. For example, they were told to come one at a time, not to be seen together, not to dine together on the night of their departure. If they had arrived at the same time, they were instructed to pretend as though they didn't even know each other. They were to avoid newspaper reporters, because these were well-known men, and had they been spotted by reporters, which often frequented the railroad station, especially had they been seen together, many questions would have been asked. One of the men carried a shotgun in a big black case, so that if he had been asked where he was going, he was prepared to say that he was going on a duck hunting trip. And the interesting thing about that little piece of the history is that this man, we find out later from his biographer, never fired a gun in his life. He even had to borrow that shotgun in order to participate in this deception. Even after they got on board the railroad car, this pattern continued. They were told to use first names only, not to use last names. And 2 of the men adopted code names completely. The reason for that is that they were afraid that the servants on board the train would recognize who they were if they used their last names. And they knew that if word leaked out in that fashion and eventually found its way into the press, the whole purpose of the meeting would have been completely destroyed. So absolute secrecy was essential.
At this point, it already sounds like a movie scene. Secret arrivals, code names, a stage story with a shotgun that was never meant to be fired. And yet, this is not fiction. This is documented history, as Edward Griffin explains from public records and direct testimonies. He is about to walk you through how this began, the origin of it, the mechanism that came out of this meeting. You start realizing how intelligent these men were, how carefully they planned every step, how they understood perception, politics, and human psychology, and how something placed directly in front of everyone can remain unseen for decades. Pay close attention to what he says next.
The servants and train crew may have known the identities of 1 or 2 of us, but they did not know all, and it was the names of all printed together that would have made our mysterious journey significant in Washington, in Wall Street, even in London. Discovery, we knew, simply must not happen. Or why? What's the big deal here? What's wrong with a group of bankers getting together in private and talking about banking or banking legislation? And the answer to that question is provided by Vanderlip himself in the same article. He said, "If it were to be exposed publicly that our particular group had got together and written a banking bill, that bill would have no chance whatever of passage by Congress. Why not? Because the purpose of the bill was to break the grip of the money trust. And ladies and gentlemen, it was written by the money trust. It's as simple as that. Had that fact been known from the very beginning, the public would never have accepted it as a means of breaking the grip over the money trust."
This is where you start seeing how far this reach actually goes, how long it has been in place, and how carefully it was built, step by step. Griffin walks through the timing of it, the context of that period, the mechanism that came out of this meeting. As you follow this, you begin to notice patterns that most people overlook. You stop reacting late to what happens around you. You begin to anticipate how things unfold. This is the kind of understanding powerful people quietly rely on. The difference between hearing about events and knowing how the structure behind them actually works. Watch this.
Here we had the Rockefellers, we had the Morgans, Kuhn Loeb and Company, the Rothschilds, the Warburgs, all in one room for 9 days plus 2 days on the train, coming to an agreement. What's going on here? Anything strange about that mixture? Well, ladies and gentlemen, these were competitors. These were the giants in the field which prior to this period had been beating their heads against each other for dominance in the marketplace, for dominance in the financial markets of the world, not only New York, but Paris and London, everywhere. Competitors. And what happened on Jekyll Island is that they formed a banking cartel. Perhaps I should define that word in more detail so at least you'll know what I'm talking about when I use the word. A cartel is a group of independently owned businesses which come together for the purpose of reducing or eliminating competition between themselves so that they can enhance their profit margins or secure their position in the marketplace. This cartel went into partnership with the government. Well, cartels often do that to enforce their cartel agreements, but in this case they did it in spades.
This starts to feel like a scene from House of Cards. Rivals sitting at the same table, people who normally compete suddenly aligning because each of them has something to gain. We've seen this dynamic in movies and series so many times that it feels like fiction. A clever storyline, a dramatic exaggeration. And yet, Griffin says this is exactly what happened. Documented, recorded, explained step by step. I'm not here to tell you what to think about it. I don't have access to hidden archives or secret proof. But the way he lays it out makes uncomfortable sense. Because when you step back and look at how the world works today, this stops feeling like an old story and starts feeling like a description of everyday reality. So keep watching carefully.
Now, when they met on Jekyll Island, it was very clear in their mind that they were creating a central bank. But they had a problem, what to call it, because Congress was already on record as saying they did not want a central bank in America. I don't think the congressmen really understood what that meant, but they had heard the phrase and they knew that that's what they had in Europe. And they said, no, when it comes to banking reform in America, we want something that's unique to represent our unique political and economic system. So a central bank was out. So what to call this central bank so that no one will know? And they talked about this on Jekyll Island. And this is what they concluded. They said, first, let's use the word federal to make it seem like it's a government operation. Secondly, let's add the word reserve to make it seem like there are reserves somewhere, like it was a banking concept. Third, let's add the word system. And this was very important, far more than we might think today, because remember, the major concern was this concentration of financial power in New York. And they had to sell the American people on the idea that this was a diffusion of power over a system of banks. And so they talked about 10 regional banks, and finally they said, no, that's not enough, we'll have 12 regional banks and diffuse the power away from New York, or at least make it appear that way. Well, as you've heard said many times by now, what we wound up with was not federal. There are no reserves. It's not a system at all in the sense of diffusion of power, and the Federal Reserve banks aren't even banks. So on all four words, we're dealing with appearances of the fourth kind. Brilliant strategy.
Federal Reserve System. Words that sound reassuring. Words that suggest safety, structure, and control. And yet, Griffin says the real power was never in the words. It was in the mechanism behind them. Now think about the last few years. You work the same hours, you earn roughly the same money, but groceries cost more. Rent costs more. Fuel costs more. You feel like you are running harder just to stay in the same place. This is not random. This is not bad luck. This is not just the economy being unstable. What you're about to see explains why this happens. It explains why the middle class slowly feels squeezed, why assets go up in price, why those who borrow early seem to benefit, why those who save feel like they fall behind. Griffin is about to show you the exact mechanism behind this in very simple terms. And once you see it, everyday things start to make a lot more sense. Watch this part very carefully.
Now let's see where the banking cartel benefits from this partnership. We'll go back to that $1 billion check and follow it. The Treasury official deposits it into the checking account of the federal government. And immediately all the computers start to whir and the ledgers show that the government now has $1 billion deposit, $1 billion in its account, and so therefore it can write checks up to $1 billion. Government checks start flowing. Let's just follow a $100 check. Make this real simple to the fellow that delivers our mail. The postal worker gets a $100 check. And he looks at this and he can't imagine in his wildest dreams that just 2 days ago that money didn't exist anywhere in the universe. But it's a government check now, and it's very spendable. So he takes it and deposits it into his private checking account at the local commercial bank. Now this money is out of the Federal Reserve mechanism per se, out of the government side of the partnership, and it gets into the private banking side of the partnership. $100 has been deposited. Now the action heats up. The banker looks at that and he goes over to the loan window and he opens it up and he says, "Attention everybody, we have money to loan." And that's good news for a lot of people because that's one of the reasons we go to the bank, isn't it? To borrow money. So it's good news when there's money available. And the banker says, "We have $100 deposited, but don't worry folks, we can loan you more than that. We can loan you up to $900. Well, how? How can you loan out up to $900 when you only have $100 deposited? Well, it's not difficult if you're in the Federal Reserve System. Here's how it works. The Federal Reserve says that the member banks must keep no less than 10% of their deposits in reserve. So there's $100. They keep 10% in reserve, $10. And they can loan up to $90, right? So we loan it to you, ma'am. You borrowed $90. What do you do with it? Well, you want to spend it. So you want to write a check on it. You've deposited it into your checking account so you can write a check. In many cases, it might be put directly into your checking account. But now there's $90 deposit, in addition to the $100 that was deposited to start this chain. Now we've got the $90 that was loaned as another deposit. Well, the Federal Reserve says that you only have to keep 10%, so we keep 10% of the 90 and loan the other 90%. And the person that borrows that puts it right back into the bank as another deposit. Well, the Federal Reserve says you only have to keep 10%, so this goes around and around and around the revolving door until finally the whole action is played out. And the bottom line is when that $100 deposit comes in from the postal worker, the banks in essence can loan up to $900 because $100 is the reserve and that's 10% of 1,000, so they can loan the balance or the difference, which is $900. Now, where does that money come from? Well, same place. It springs into being precisely at the point where the loan is made. It didn't exist before, anywhere. Now notice the important thing here. The money that's created out of nothing and given to the government spends for its purposes. But the money that's created out of nothing by the banks is not spent by the banks, it's loaned by the banks to you and to me, and we pay interest on it. Not too shabby. Interest on nothing.
Now bring this into your daily life. Think about what you hear on the news. Inflation is 4%, inflation is 5%. These sound like small numbers that don't seem dramatic. But here's what that actually means for you. If inflation is 5% this year, and your money stays in the bank, you did not keep your value. You quietly lost 5% of what that money can buy. Your salary may look the same, the number in your account may look the same, but groceries cost more, rent costs more, utilities cost more. And many of these go up by far more than 5%. That is the dilution Griffin is talking about. Now think about what happens when banks suddenly have more money to loan. Companies borrow, investors borrow, governments borrow. That money enters the economy before prices adjust. They buy assets, they buy property, they buy shares. By the time that money reaches you through salaries, prices have already moved. You arrive last. That is why houses feel harder to afford every year. That is why saving feels like standing still. And that's why borrowing often feels like the only way forward. This is the mechanism you are watching right now. And Griffin is about to show you how this loop keeps repeating.
What impact does that have on us? Are we involved in this in any way? Well, yes, we are. I've heard people say, gee, those fellows are really smart. I guess they deserve to be rich. You know, as though it didn't affect them in any way. Let's follow it. This money that's created out of nothing goes into the economy, and it dilutes down the value of the dollars that were already out there. It's like pouring water into the pot of soup. It dilutes the soup. And so the economy is diluted by these new dollars, and prices start to go up, or they appear to be going up. It's the process called inflation. I say appear to go up because prices really don't go up, ladies and gentlemen. What's happening is that the value of the dollar goes down. We call them dollars. They're not. They're really Federal Reserve notes. They buy less and less and less because they keep creating more and more and more of them, and they dilute the economic soup.
Think about how this feels in real life. You save money for years, you try to be responsible, you avoid debt, and somehow you still feel like you fall behind. At the same time, you see people who borrow heavily. They buy property, they buy assets, they seem to move faster. And everyone tells you the same thing. In times like this, it's better to borrow than to save. That advice is not random, because the value of money changes over time, and the moment you receive it matters more than the amount itself. Some people get access to this money early, before prices adjust. Most people receive it late, after prices have already moved. And without realizing it, you are always playing from behind.
But how many people ask the question, who gained it? Did anybody gain our lost purchasing power, or did it just evaporate and go up to heaven somewhere? Somebody gained it, didn't they? But we don't know who. Let's follow it. The people who gained our lost purchasing power were those who were at the point where this fresh money was injected into the economic soup. Those at the nozzle get dollars that look the same as all the other dollars, and they have them first, and they can spend them at full purchasing power. But by the time the person who gets those dollars then gives them to the next person and the next person, it goes out toward the edge of the pot, where most of us are, and it gets diluted down. But the ones up there at the nozzle are the ones who have gained our lost purchasing power. Who are they? Well, we know that the government is one of them. That's where the billion-dollar check started, isn't it? That was the beginning of this whole process. The government spent that money first. And then, of course, those who work for the government and those who have government contracts and those who get grants and so forth get the next wave, and they're not doing too bad either, and it starts out from there. But what about on the banking side? Who got that money first off? Well, the people that came up to the loan window. They were the first ones to get it. Now, this comes as no surprise to anybody here, I'm sure, that in times of inflation, it's a good thing to borrow. Everybody tells you that because you say, you know that you're going to borrow $1 and you pay it back with quarters or 50-cent pieces because inflation erodes the value of those dollars. So you know to borrow is to gain. And the people who don't borrow, who save, they're the ones who are losing. But notice, however, that this gain that the borrower gets, he has to turn right around and give to the bank in the form of interest on nothing. So he doesn't really gain at all. It appears to be gain, it's paper gain, but his gain actually goes back to the bank as interest on nothing. Now, yes, during times of inflation, his paper assets expand. Golly, this real estate looks like it's worth a lot of money right now. But then the economy contracts. And he's wiped out. He doesn't have anything. And notice that when you go to the bank and you go to borrow some of this nothing money, did they expect nothing from you in return? No. They want you to sign over and pledge as collateral your car, your house, your assets. Hard assets, not nothing assets. So when the economy contracts and you can't continue to make those payments, they get your marbles. So the bank will do all right, whether it's expansion or contraction. So what's the answer to the question? Who gains? Who got your lost purchasing power? Big surprise, ladies and gentlemen. The two members of the partnership called the Federal Reserve System. It's the government and the members of the banking cartel. Those are the ones who got your purchasing power.
When you watch stories like this, it is easy to feel overwhelmed. It can sound like a conspiracy. But maybe the point is not to argue about every detail. Maybe the point is to understand something much simpler. That powerful, intelligent people can sit at the same table, agree on a direction, and shape systems that affect millions of lives for generations. We see this dynamic in movies all the time. Rivals becoming allies because each of them has something to gain. Careful planning, long-term thinking, patience, strategy. Griffin's explanation is not meant to make you angry. It is not meant to make you hate anyone. It is meant to make you understand the mechanism. Because once you understand the mechanism, you stop feeling hopeless. You stop feeling like you're stuck in a race you can never win. You start seeing why money loses value over time. Why keeping it still can be a mistake. Why assets behave differently than cash. Why timing matters. You start understanding how to protect yourself from inflation, how to move with the system instead of constantly fighting it. This is not about blaming anyone. This is about learning the rules of the game that has been running for a long time. And once you see the rules clearly, you can choose to play smarter. I'm not here to tell you what to think, only to show you how to look at these structures that are often in plain sight, but rarely understood. Because once you understand them, the news makes more sense, economic decisions make more sense, and your own financial decisions start to change.